What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Cody Hughes, and I'm here with Coach Tony Holler. This is a long-time conversation that I've been wanting to have, and really appreciate Coach taking the time out of his day to sit down and talk with me so we can discuss training and all things performance. So, Coach, thanks for coming on.
I've been looking forward to this.
Me too. Absolutely. Well, we're going to start off. We're not going to give any backgrounds, any intros or anything like that. If you need any of that, you guys can go look on another episode. All you have to do is Google "feed the cats" and that'll take care of the rest. But from here, we want to talk about. I want to talk with you, Coach. The first thing is, originally, at one point, I pissed you off and I pissed Mike Boyle off, and I'm not sure how I did it, but I did. And I want to know, where we missed and that we didn't see eye to eye, and that's okay. We don't have to see eye to eye. No. But I just want to ask you straight up, what took you off about me? What completely sent you off from your perspective about me?
It's my son Alec counsels me often that I should never block anybody, and a lot of people are very surprised to know that I'm really sensitive because that's not my personality. Like sometimes people who are have strong statements and stuff are sensitive too, and so I've always in my life tried to steer away from anything that takes away the joy of everyday life. Like if there's teachers that talk bad about school and about students, I just wouldn't go in. I didn't want to talk to them. I wanted to surround myself. Well, now the problem with that is that then you surround yourself with like-minded people, and that's not all good either. So looking back, it may have just been me being hypersensitive, but as we were talking right before we went on air, I mentioned that Mark Manson says there has to be certain things that you'll go to war about. And honestly, I can't remember what it was that pissed me off about something you said. But one of the things it could have been is I am one of the most multi-sport warriors that I know. And so much of that is where we come from. My dad coached for 47 years basketball. He also coached tennis. He coached track. He coached baseball. He coached football. The sports saved his life. Sports really was the total reason he went to college. The first one in his family to ever go to college. He was born in a tent during the Depression at a work camp. Wow. And so sports was just so important to him. And all sports, not just the one he was coaching at the time, but all sports. And so I think I've adopted that mentality. And as a high school coach, we, especially in our area, I don't know how it is in your area, but in our area, we have to fight for our kids. That there are people that own businesses that try to convince kids not to lift with their sports team at the high school. Yeah, but they need to lift with them.
Yeah, we fight that battle here too. Yeah.
We have organizations that run 7-on-7 stuff that have become so huge in our area that they are providing counseling. They're like the agent for the kids. They are.
That's insane.
That's what they lift, and they say, "Are you kidding? You're going to go out for track and field? You are missing out, buddy. You need to pay $500 a month and be with us." And so we are constantly fighting that fight. So I'm a huge like if you're good. And, nobody should talk you out playing that sport. And so, I post a lot of things, as you know, that talk about professional athletes that did all sports. And I think that's misunderstood sometimes. Obviously, running track and field, if you're a high school guy, is not going to be your ticket to the NFL. That's not it. But if you look at what people in the NFL do or did, 63% of them ran track and field.
Mm-hmm.
Not many.
So
of
the
them.
argument to that, so I'll rebut to that.
I was monologuing
is
there.
Right. The transitive property rarely works. You know, A equals B, B equals A, of causation correlation, trying to understand that and saying that, why did 63% of them run track? That's what we're trying to figure out, and just be clear. And I'm not saying that that running track is bad, because by no means, if a track program is ran well and you have speed involved in the sport you play, why would you not do it? But there's a lot of track programs that are running kids into the ground, as you know. Like running, oh man. So it's just so discouraging. So on the flip side, it's like, did Tyreek Hill run track because he got recruited because he was a cat?
Sure.
Because somebody saw he's really good. So you know what I'm saying? Now that doesn't mean that coach that he got coached by track didn't refine, you know, max velocity mechanics and efficiency on top of his ridiculous engine, you know. Sure. Not saying that didn't. It's just more. It's more of a complex conversation than simply the pros did it, you should do it. You know, that's 100%. So. I think that's too reductionist.
100%. There's so much to unpack with what you just said. I posted something on Twitter just last week saying that there are more track coaches that run their athletes off than there are football coaches that hoard their athletes, and I truly believe that. And that's kind of my mission with Feed the Cats, is that Feed the Cats really in 1999 we adopted a way of training that really looked like NFL combine training. Mm-hmm. We sprinted, we jumped high, jumped far, and we lifted. So my track program is really a great fit for football players. And you are totally right. The thing I say all the time, the distance coaches damn near ruin track and field, because they run 10-200s, and cats don't run 10-200s. They don't run warm-up miles. They don't run cool-down miles. They don't like to get tired. So you have that part of it. I totally agree. But we also have the part that I think too many people see track and field as simply a sport that reveals talent. They're correct. It does reveal talent, but it does not simply reveal talent. Done right, track and field is amazing. And even done wrong, a guy gets to go out and compete. Now, I think when you compete in track and field, you have a tendency to get better. I mean, you have a tendency to get faster. So even in poorly coached track programs, I think that there can be a great benefit. But to your point, if I was a football coach and there was an old school run their ass off track program, I'd say, don't go out. No question. But then getting back to the whole NFL thing is that the most important thing I think you can take from the multi-sport thing, and of course track is the number one secondary sport to football players. The most important thing we can take from that is that those guys did not decide to just lift or just go private training for the other 9 months of their year. That typically competitors want to compete. And I think it's just so important, because I think the number one thing about playing a sport is the educational value. Teammates, competition, learning to deal with losing. So many football players I have to talk them off a ledge, because if they get second place in a race, they want to quit.
Yeah.
You know,
I see that. I mean, you know, it's funny how you got a kid that may be really talented in one sport and he goes and plays another sport and they become more of a role player. You're a contributor, you're good, but you're no longer the star. I mean, dealing with that is very, very valuable. As far as the multi-sport argument of just complete development, human development and developing kids, I 100% agree with. I really do. And the hard thing though is people, they push, like, if you're not playing another sport, that's bad. And like, don't force a kid to play a sport that it's just a bad situation. And it's so contextual. Some kid may love this sport, some kid might not. And I'll be honest, in the world and society we live in, kids have a hard time being just a good high school player these days. That's why they don't want to play it. Like I've been talking about it with my staff here at this school, is that we've got some really good baseball players that could be good football players for us and help us win. We have really good football players that could be a contributor on track. They're not going to run track in college, but they could help us win, right? We could have really good football players that could play basketball, help us win, and then vice versa, right? So like we have a serious issue with wanting to just be a good high school player, because for some reason there's no scholarship money in it, because that's the only reason we play sports these days is for scholarships. That's it. That's too shallow. And it starts with parents.
100%. And, and then schools, like the biggest day at Plainfield North High School for our athletic department is signing day. And it just gags me. I mean, like there's people that are signing to play a Division III school. I'm like, just go out.
Don't get me started on that, man.
I mean, I'm a Division III athlete. I mean, my dad coached a Division III college basketball, and I love Division III, but it's not a signing issue. I mean, you just go to that school and you go out for the team. And you're right, though, that parents, many parents, if they have a kid that has talent, become their agent. And they immediately start looking for private instruction, which takes them away from educational opportunities. You used the word force, and I think that's an important thing. That encourage and force are really two different things. What I say, and people ask me this, like one of my sons was a marginally good basketball player, but he was going to be like ninth man on his team as a senior. Now, when he asked me, like, what do you think? Do I need to play basketball? And I said, I think if you're playing, I think you should. So if a kid is good enough to help the team and he wants to play, he should be encouraged to play, never forced. But that encouragement should be all the time. And for anybody to discourage a kid that's good enough to play, who likes the game, because there's scholarship money and we need to hit certain goals, that's where I really start to want to fight and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, tribalism is the word that you used earlier that I think just being tribal of, and it's almost like some parents get caught up in this peer pressure and FOMO with their other kids that are friends' peers, and you get all this social pressure of all your kids not playing 7-on-7. They're going to miss out. They're not going to camps and this, that, and another. That makes it really difficult. And it's harder to be a parent today in today's sporting environment, having a high school kid, than ever. I'm not looking forward to my kid's 2.5. I don't know what it's going to be like when in 10 years, 15 years when he gets older.
It's not going to be better.
It's going to be, I don't see it getting better.
No. And the way like sports were in the 70s for me, I played football in the fall. I played basketball. I ran track in the spring. And then summer was basketball. There was no summer football. Oh, yeah, there was like 3 weightlifting sessions at night or something like that. But now there are schools around here that have 25 contact days. That's what they get in Illinois. And their time is 7 a.m. till noon with their kids. Well, to me, you're just running off athletes. You're making it impossible for that point guard to play football too. And I think we need to look at those things as well. And there's just not enough leadership in athletic departments that are really trying to get coaches on the same page. I think that coaches do way too much, and it brings in feed the cats ideas. That they do too much. 7 to noon is just stupid. 7 a.m. till noon.
It's ridiculous.
Summer days. It's not like, I disagree with that. No, it's just damn stupid.
Yeah, I agree. And I see it now just from I was in high school 10 years ago. Okay, so I'm really young, but I was in high school 10 years ago. And I remember my process. I played football in the fall. Summer was football. Yep. I played college baseball. Baseball's rampant in the summer now.
Yep.
But I was at football every day. Played football, right? And then I'd have a break and I'd get ready for baseball and I'd play baseball. And I would play maybe two tournaments in the summer on the weekend for baseball, whatever. But now when we have summer for football, I mean, it's 4 days a week. You got like our quarterback's a big time baseball prospect. He's hardly ever there. Guys that play basketball, June is the basketball month in Alabama where they have a certain amount. It's like the basketball spring training, where they're having to go to football in the morning and then go to basketball where it's really intense. And then they play 10 or 15 play dates that summer. And I'm like, guys are just getting run into the ground. And by the time we get like, we're playing a game that we can't catch up from. And I'm over here in the weight room trying to have really good protocols to keep us healthy, trying to take care of our soft tissues. I'm in the training room with our athletic trainer communicating and fighting. And I'm like, if we stop pedaling, we're going to drown, but we're already fighting a losing battle. It's systemically messed up.
So what's the answer? Let's solve that problem between me and you right now.
Leadership. I really don't know where else to go because
what would leadership do though?
Well, the first thing is looking at opportunity cost. This opportunity cost narrative from parents is really difficult. I don't know if you can solve this problem because you're not going to be able to convince a parent that your kid's not LeBron James.
Yeah.
So they're going to feel like they want to be able to sleep at night by giving their kid every resource possible. And they feel, okay, I provided for my child and gave them every opportunity to be the best when they don't realize that they're making things worse when you feel really good because you're active, but you're not being productive whatsoever. You're just doing things.
Yes.
You're not getting better at anything. Like we've taken away the art of developmental time. Like you need to develop, I tell people all the time with baseball, like, oh, you're going to a showcase this weekend to throw 82. All they're going to do is scratch you off their list and take your paycheck. You're not showcasing anything other than you suck. Thanks.
Yeah.
But parents don't want to hear that. They don't understand that. And I'm a parent. And my dad warns me of this. He's like, son, you claim all this, but one day your son's going to be 15. And if he has a sheer bit of talent, you're going to have some parent bias goggles that you're going to have to fight really hard to take off. So don't think that you're not going to be susceptible to this. So I try to be really empathetic to parents who are going through this, but back to the problem solving. I don't know if it's solvable. I think the only way you solve it is at the ground level, developing relationships with parents and showing that you care over and over and over and over and over again. And hopefully you can move that needle on the individual side. Systemically, it's going to take all of us doing that on the ground level.
I think that like in anything else, you got to start with your own house. Like what can I do as a track coach to create the ability to play multiple sports and enhance the educational opportunities of kids. And so what I do is we don't practice 3 hours. We practice 45 minutes. I accept the fact that some of my kids will play in AAU basketball tournaments on the weekend or go to a 7-on-7. Now, when they come back on Monday and they are running 3 miles an hour slower than they ran the week before, I'll say, what's up? Oh, well, coach, we had, 38 games over the weekend. How's that working out for you? Is that really helping you? So we can have those. So if we could just get athletic departments themselves, like individual coaches, but also athletic departments to stop, or, individual coaches and individual sports stop fighting themselves and put the kid first. And realize that 8 hours of football in the morning ruins that kid's summer. It ruins his development in other sports. It's probably hurting your program as well. So a less is more essentialist approach, especially in the summers. Oh my God, summers are crazy. Like I don't have any summers at all. None. Because
kids summers are crazy. They really are. I mean,
they have enough problems without me.
It's
making it worse.
Yeah. I get it. Well,
so
but then comes in
that,
ego,
and then smart educators, start, having a really sensible voice coming from an athletic department towards parents, like you were saying, like parent education and why that 6'6" tight end in football who's really good at basketball shouldn't quit basketball because he wants to play college football. And
you know what also needs that though, Coach?
What's that?
Is that just like you talk about your program that I love from what you preach is fun. If our programs would find a way to make it attractive, like that 6'6" tight end will want to play basketball because it's fun. Coaches suck the fun out of work. You know, you can have both, right? You can have both.
And I think people, when they hear my fun approach, they think it's grab ass. They think it's
exactly
joking around, laughter. There is incredible intensity in my track practice. It's just not dreadful. And we do sprint practice, and there's a freshman basketball team and a sophomore basketball team every day practicing out in the middle of our field house. And those teams start practice every day with 30 minutes of running. They run more than we do. More
running than your track team actually runs.
It's like, I would hate that. But you know how basketball players are. They'll eat crap to get to play. I mean, just because you can get away with it doesn't mean you should do it. And I think you're 100% correct that if we are in a battle for the hearts and soul of athletes, and we better adjust the way we do things, especially in football. Mm-hmm. Good God, in football, you'll never have another basketball player ever go out for football if you're run like the Junction Boys.
Yeah, it's funny how coaches, it's a privilege to be called coach. It's a dang privilege to be called coach, and too many people get to be called coach and ought to have that crap revoked from them, in my opinion, because it seems to be so easy that you sucked as an athlete and maybe you were unhappy or whatever, and you turn around and now you become a coach and decide that you're literally feeding your ego that you have this void in your heart of identity and who you are as a person. So you take it out on these kids who don't deserve it. And that's the kind of crap that fires me up, because like that's the kind of stuff we're battling. That's the war we're in. And just continuing doing what we're doing and trying to just put out content and information and be available and like you said, take care of our own house, do the work in the building that we're in with the hearts and souls of the kids that we're working with in order to help out and continue to promote what sports is even here for in the first place for these kids. And I wish coaches would just take more pride in doing that. And the less is more approach makes you be a better coach. It makes you get rid of the crap. It makes you critically think, right? You can still get it done with less time if you're worth your salt. But the coaches who always want to do more, you can't convince me that they're any good. Now, I'm not saying there's not a requisite amount of work that needs to be done.
Sure.
I'm not saying that there's not a lot of things that go into, all these things, but it's the same thing that you study with being happy as an employer, or like, for example, you look at the football culture with coaches. Think about how your family is when you have to be up here on a Saturday, film sessions, meetings forever, death by meeting, film, and you don't get to go home and see your family. Now your coaches are unhappy, they're burnt out, their wives are mad. You're not taking care of your people first. So what kind of quality product are you going to get from them when they're constantly burnt out? You don't think that doesn't apply to your athletes too? Make them back wanting more. That's a big thing you coin of wanting, leave a little in the tank so they come back hungry again the next day. Like, Don't let today ruin tomorrow. Those are things that I love.
Yep.
Love that. As an overall approach to how we should handle things.
There's a couple reasons why coaches do more. One is that it's really hard work. I think coaches that do too much don't know what the right things are. It's really easy to say, just do the important things. But then you have to decide what the important things are. And it's a lot easier just to do everything. And then the other thing is that the typical coach was not a star athlete. The typical coach was just a very hard worker. They came early, stayed late, and they were kind of a grinder as an athlete. I think that's where most coaches come from. And so because they came from there, it's very difficult for them to adopt a less is more essentialist type of attitude towards that sport. And then you throw in the other thing too, is that, sports really took off right after World War II. And that was because people came home from the war. Boys came home from the war, and they'd gone through some really hard stuff, and they bonded because it's in our DNA that when men go through really hard things in a group, they become really close to that group. And so even in sports like baseball, it's like a picnic sport, they would run baseball players to death because that was turning boys into men, and the bonding thing of going through hell with your comrades and all. So there's just so many things that if you really stand back and ask yourself, what's important, you'd probably change some things.
You said something important. Here's a topic we can talk on that we may have some disagreements on, because what you said is when you go through hard things together, a lot of times people say that trust can be built through shared suffering.
Yep.
Let's talk through that team dynamic, because to me, this is just my observation. Track and field, the only thing that seems to be collaborative team-wise is your relay races. Like, that takes a lot of trust and practice within each other. But other than that, it's a stopwatch type of sport where it's very individual, and there's not a lot of things. It's not like on a basketball court or on a football field where communication and trust and chemistry is super, super, super important, that just about every coach I've talked to can agree that coach football, baseball, these type of chemistry-based sports on fields and courts, that we have to have some type of identity. They throw out all these terms that might be, nebulous, but you have like toughness gets thrown out often, right? Okay, we need to define that. But shared suffering and trust and bond, like wanting to play, because our head football coach coins it like this way, and it's brilliant. It's doing things with great effort, doing things right, and doing things with someone else in mind. Like that's literally our core values of our football team. And doing it with someone else in mind gets harder and harder in our society. But we have seen success in the past of people getting close because of the things that they endure together. Now, how do we do that without going overboard and not training kids like Navy SEALs? Because that's the lack of critical thinking of, we need to do something hard. We need to come up with really meaningless drills to do something hard, and therefore we'll be tough. Because that's another reductionist and lack of critical thinking approach. We've got to be better than that. So what do you think on that as far as the shared suffering part?
Yeah, that's once again, lots to unpack. Really great track coaches develop a culture where track is truly a team sport, where I may not be running the 800 meters, but my friend is, and I share in his victory and his suffering both. And then that, and so great coaches create significant. If you really think about it, playing basketball, throwing a ball into a basket is pretty trivial crap. And running track where you're like running around in circles, pretty trivial, but yet people can create significance and meaning towards any activity. I mean, like even like a hobby, you can create tremendous meaning and significance. So I think first of all, that's what a coach does, is create this culture of significance where if you're successful, you celebrate together. And if you fail together. And I think, I've seen track athletes with tears in their eyes, after a failed team effort, or, losing the 4x4 at the end of a meet. And so I think that shared suffering does not have to be torture. It can be losing. Right. And God knows there's a lot of losing that we put up with in sports. So
well, there's a lot of kids don't like it. It's almost, okay. This is another thing. Just going to piggyback off this is it goes right in line with what we're talking about is like, everybody uses this cliche term, like you got to hate losing more than you like winning, blah, blah, blah. But it's not like competitors compete, like you said, right? And losing has to mean something. You know what I mean? It's like some kids are scared to death to invest, because what if I actually invest, put time and effort and show that I care, because high school kids are ridiculously insecure, and then you fail? How painful. I want to avoid that pain at all costs. That's what I see, is that I don't want to invest because what if I get hurt? But the good ones do that regardless. They'll put it on the line.
And I think good coaches just don't have that problem very often with their athletes. There's something about, I've seen coaches that were successful, and in my opinion, they did most things wrong. But the thing they did right, well, for example, my high school football coach, I don't think he did many things correct. It wasn't real good. But I would have run through a brick wall for him. And I cried at his funeral. So, and I think that's what coaches can do. That even though he was doing everything wrong, I was still with him. And I think that's the beauty. Yeah. And we talk about tribalism. Let's harness tribalism. That's we in our DNA. We want to be in a group of like-minded people going on a journey together. And so that's what good coaches do. And I think that's the beauty of sports, is that kids typically will lay it on the line. Especially
I completely agree
in the right situation. And the ones that don't
is everything, right?
The ones that don't, they need to be talked to or eliminated, because there's places where you don't have to compete. You can be in the band and be a lot happier. You don't have to lay it on the line in the band. And I love band. I think those kids have more fun than football players.
Yeah.
But to a lot of us that have that caveman mentality, we want to lay it on the line. We want to go out and win or lose. Either one. It's okay if we hate losing. It's okay to hate defeat, to hate failure. But it's also, it makes it a lot of fun, obviously, when those opposite things happen.
It's funny. I'm going to give a shout out to my wife here, because she's taught me more about parenting than ever. It's made me such a better coach of learning how to communicate and be patient. And we talk about how, learning to fail is okay, and that some coaches create an environment that failure is the end of the freaking world instead of it being an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Hey, if you'll stop putting failure way up here, when your kids fail in the game, they might actually be a little more resilient when they drop a pass, or, when they travel, or they commit a stupid foul. If you will learn how to handle that, they will follow suit. They watch us every turn we make. They're watching how we respond, our body language, what do we deem as important, what do we not what comes out of our flapper, what comes out of our mouth, and all the crap we try to talk at the end of practice in our huddles. It's your actions every single day. And that's one of my biggest things that I try to preach about mental toughness, is that mental toughness is how you go about your day. It is your program. It's not a byproduct. It's not a part. It's not a part it's not a tab in your little binder of your program principles. It's how you act. It's literally how you act and how you integrate, and how you integrate with people, and how you talk to people, how you treat people, the decisions you make. If you mess up, do you apologize? Are you leading the pack? Or if you're a coach, are you leading? That's where that comes from. And kids, I get it. I heard somebody say that the 15-year-old male is the dumbest animal on planet Earth, and I'm that's probably correct. Is that they don't have any emotional intelligence, because if you understand how the brain works, they're very emotional. Humans in general are emotionally tied, but their development of their prefrontal cortex is not developed. So it's like they might not even have the capacity to think the way we do. Why don't we empathize with our kids and try to think how they think? Maybe what we think is stupid is the end of the world to them. Well, now let's use that to our advantage to help teach, and teach them how to handle failure. That failure is just another opportunity to learn and get back on the line. And then I'm not going to completely chastise you for it. We're going to learn. Now, I'm not saying that there's not silly things that need to be addressed, especially repetitive issues. that's a whole nother rabbit hole, right? Because everything has context. Everything is contextual, and there hardly are any absolutes, right? And we have to be very careful with that, in my opinion, of how we do that. And I really agree on all fronts of how being coaches and how we're going to address our kids means everything. And you're right. The more we talk here, I think that there's a serious red herring of like, we need to have shared suffering. Well, not necessarily. We just need to bond over everything. Like us as kids, I remember like if you're playing hoops with a friend in the neighborhood, you bond over time shared together over something you like. That's it. Like spend time with each other, get to know each other, and you start to create a bond through time and shared interests.
Yep. And kids will, when kids like what they do, they have a tendency to really be pretty good at it, and I think I've been criticized before that I don't make things hard enough, to create toughness.
Right.
And it's because in a lot of ways I'm very hyperbolic in the way I deliver my stuff because, it's a pretty big war. I feel like I'm fighting out there, to make sports better for kids. And a friend, Jamie Monroe, he's a big lacrosse guru, national lacrosse guy. He said, you need to stop preaching against hard work because you're just redefining work. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. And he's like, well, it's really hard work to decide what you would do in an hour practice instead of a 2-hour practice. That's hard. That's hard work. It's hard work to get an extra hour of sleep at night. That's hard. It's hard. It's hard work. Even if you love what you're doing, it's never torture. It's hard to lose. All those things are hard. So even when, we're trying to create this situation where kids love what they do, that doesn't mean that they're not going to suffer. Matter of fact, if you really like a girl and she dumps you, that's probably terrible.
That's
tough.
Right?
That's hard.
Yeah.
So love sometimes creates even more hardship. And doesn't have to be a girl. It could be a love of football, and I would say the kids that really love football probably take losing really hard.
Yeah, they do. I agree. Completely agree. And that goes into my next point of getting practice with fatigue. Because here's another one, right? Tired is the enemy. That's a big coined phrase from you. And in a game like football, I mean, even basketball as well, where an aerobic capacity is important, somewhat, but not necessarily exactly that, because we can both agree that the general approach that we see across high school footballs for preparing and conditioning for football is completely out of whack. But like we haven't had a defined conditioning session here at my high school in 4 years that I've been here. Not one, because we have an opportunity to practice so much and we just do specific things. But in order to get reps under fatigue, right? Because that's what's going to happen on a football field, especially in high school if you have guys playing both ways, late in a drive, late in a game. Where do we go when we get fatigued, right? How do we solve that problem if we try to always stay away from being tired?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. And one of the things that is very unique in my teaching is to let games be the hardest thing you do. That is so hard for a coach to say that, the game's going to be really hard.
It's usually the opposite, right?
Oh, yeah.
We want it to be harder so it's easy in the game.
Yeah. My dad's famous quote was, we're going to make practice so damn hard that the games will feel easy. And everybody shook their head. And of course, that's what we do. That's intuitive. It's counterintuitive.
Now, let me ask you. I'm going to stop you here because I want to make sure I'm clear on this, because this is just for the audience too, because I think I know what you mean, but I want to make sure the audience understands. When you say hard, you're talking about physiologically, correct? Are you meaning physiologically or overall? Because I'm questioning, because there's some things of you want to get specific of treating game-like chaotic situations for like basketball and football.
Sure.
That's hard, but it's not necessarily that difficult on the body.
Yeah, I'm
You know what I'm saying?
more in terms of volume. Volume.
Okay.
of work.
Volume. There we go.
Volume.
Got it.
That's a good thing because, for example, my track team, I say that tired is the enemy, but our lactate workouts are absolutely brutal. They're awful. They are so terrible that I apologize to my kids before. I say, guys, we have to do this stuff because we have to learn how to sprint further. We've developed our speed in the winter. Now we're only going to do this like once a week, but this is going to be hell. And they go, God, how many are we running, coach? I said, we're running 3 200s. Well, that doesn't sound too bad. Yeah, but we're going to spike up. And we only have 4 minutes rest in between. So yes, there will be hard things, but I think overall the volume will not be. And, we learn well from stories. And there was a coach that self-proclaimed meathead football coach who he said he put his toe in the water with Feed the Cats. And then the next year he went 100%. And it was a leap of faith to say, we're not going to bring in the kids Saturdays at 6 a.m. to run them, that we're going to let them sleep in and enjoy game day. That was, like, what? Let the games be the hardest thing we do. We're not going to condition. We are going to have a wave-like thing where we are not going to practice hard every day. As a matter of fact, when we practice hard, it's a different type of hard. We're redefining hard. We're going to perform in practice a couple times a week. And so he was all excited. They were 3-0. And on Saturday, he gave me a call and said, hey, my stud running back, 33 carries, 317 yards. I'm like, holy.
That's pretty good.
That's awesome. And I said, was he pretty damn tired in the 33rd carry? And he goes, he was. But there's nothing I could have done during the week that would have made him fresh. And I'm like getting tingles. Like, that's it. That let the game be the magic. Because you and I both know that a good athlete will still bring it in the fourth quarter, even though he has maybe not been that tired all week. That may be counterintuitive. We may think that we need to practice 3 hours a day in order for that 33rd carry to be fresh. But I don't think that makes sense. I think fast guys are fast in the fourth quarter. And if we could be healthy and fresh and fast going into every football game, we'd be surprised at how successful we were late in the game when our guys are tired. I always bring up this too. The 400 meters, you probably weren't a 400-meter guy, right?
No.
Okay. I knew that. But anyway, in the 400, a couple weird things. One is that you can jog the first half thinking you're going to be strong at the end, and you're not. There's no way to conserve for it. You can condition, you can be the best conditioned in the best shape of any runner in the race. And the last 100 meters is still sheer hell. So what we do is we try to stay real fast and real specific in our training. And I tell our guys, the last 100 is going to suck. It's going to be you're going to be burning, but you'll probably be in the lead because you're fast. And it sucks for everybody. And that's kind of the way I think about football, is that the fourth quarter is going to be hard. Yeah. It's going to be hard. But I think it's better to be the freshest, healthiest, fastest guy on the field instead of the guy that's run 10,000 gassers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only way that you're fresh in the fourth quarter is either you did your job in the first half and you're up a lot and you're on the bench because you're not playing anymore, or you're already on the bench and you're not going to play anyway. If you're going to be fresh, I was like, guys, you're going to compete as hard as you can. Of course, you're going to be tired in the fourth.
Yep.
Of course you are. And I understand that there's some, coming back to the mental skills of how do we decide to act during fatigue. But fatigue, we can redefine fatigue. Practices we'll have some days where we're fatigued, where we don't feel great. Okay. Right. There'll be some times where this is difficult and frustrating me mentally. All right. Well, let's discuss and train how to behave when this happens. Because like you said, some kids will want to quit if they don't win. Like you said, some football kids will want to quit because they didn't win. It's an opportunity to learn there, like learning how to behave when things get tough. But I think the number one thing is you get kids to continue to compete when they're tired, when it just simply means more to them. Like something means significance. It means something to them. Yes. That's it. I don't think there's any crazy training or conditioning you can do, because that's the number one thing, that you're doing it with someone else in mind. You care about something greater, and that's up to the coach to create that. Yeah, just imagine if a coach creates a hatred of practice because of how hard it is. And the kid, I still think you can't hate your sport 4 days a week and love it 1 day a week. I don't think you can do that. That's tough. It's done all the time. I mean, I think that's the traditional way. I mean, you hate your sport every day because that's what practice is. And then you love the competition, and the practice is the hell you go through to get to the heaven of the competition. But I think that hate for those other 4 days bleeds into the game. And I think that maybe when you're tired, even though you've conditioned more than the other team, you don't love the love factor. I think it's just so huge, and it's significant, and you want to win, but love's kind of different. Love is not just winning. Yeah. Love is like, I want to play every play like it's my last play, and I think if you could get that going, that kind of takes the place of the traditional approach. Yeah, I think perspective of what you just mentioned on hating practice, because it's hard, but this is preparation and then you love the competition, and coaches think, well, this is how it's always been done, but you think that's breeding the love when in reality it's restricting it, I think so. And that doesn't mean that you won't have some days where you feel tired, right? That doesn't mean that, but that doesn't mean you're going to beat them into the ground. I heard an analogy once, and I can't remember what it's called. It may be a law or something, but they talked about planes in World War II and how they would come back with bullet holes in certain areas. And they would assume that, okay, those are the areas that we need to protect. But if you think about it, not really, because those are the planes that made it back. What about the places where they're not shot? Because that's what took the planes down. I'm like, okay, we need to shift the way we think about practice and think, how we're developing love of the game. Like, maybe we need to try to make it fun and create a love of the game all the time. Because then just think of the potential of when you get to game day, if the kid actually looks forward to practice. Yes. And, I'm sure you've read Malcolm Gladwell's, what's the book with the 10,000 hours? Yeah. Okay. So I'm drawing a blank myself, but I know what you mean. Yeah. It takes 10,000 hours of work to get really great at something. And one of the stories was the Beatles, they put in 10,000 hours of work before they had a hit song. But what I always say is that it wasn't work. They loved it. They love playing 6 hours a night. They love playing new songs, and I think that's the missing. Can you even get to 10th? Can you get to 10,000th hour if you don't? That's really tough to get to that hour. So that's okay. We're on to something here, Cody. That if we want kids to put in the 10,000 hours, pushing them for 10,000 hours is not going to get it, because And I think I look back at the harder practices were in college, the more I would drink at night. I just think there was a spiral of crap, to deal with the crap of practice and all that. And I think that if we really, it's a lot of work. I probably spent 12 hours preparing to do 3 Glazier presentations at a football clinic last week. And I only got paid $225. Hell, my rental car costs about that much. So people, well, why do you do that? I love it. I love presenting. I love seeing coaches head nod as I talk, or have a great question and I have to think about it. And so if you love what you do, you will work and suffer.
to
that's another thing. People say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Well, let's make sure we're clear on that. That's not true.
No.
It's just that you love to work.
Yes.
You love the work. That doesn't
Yes.
make it not hard. You just love it, and you have purpose, and it gets you up, and you look forward to the next thing because you see of what it's building towards and purpose. Purpose is half the reason why people quit anything, because they feel they don't have it.
Yep.
Like, I don't see the runway of where I'm headed. And I think great coaches do an elite job of painting that picture of what we're doing today is building towards a better tomorrow.
Yes, I think that that love allows you to suffer. Because
1,000,000%,
100%. That so we need to start with that love. And two of my favorite coaches, John O'Malley, great distance coach, and Steve Jones, a fantastic football coach. They start with love. They start with love, because love, guys will die for love. They, happens all the time. Our soldiers, you brought up a military thing, people die for the love of the country, but if that love's not there, they'll be hiding.
That's another thing. I hate the adage of how you do one thing is how you do everything. I think that's one of the most misleading quotes I've ever heard, because I learned it this simple, that I hated getting up early in the morning to go work out at 4:30 in the morning, because that's the only time I have to do it. I'll be pretty inconsistent on that. But if my son is crying at 3:30 a.m., it's a no-brainer. I'm out of the bed. It ain't nothing. It's what's required. I love my son. There's no choice there. I don't complain about it. I've committed to, like, all right, let's look at this here now. Like, when you love something, the choice gets simpler.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I don't know if it's an easy choice, because I don't know if the word's easy, but it's simpler. The choice is made.
If you love something, like you say, you just do it. You accept the.
Because I don't think you can. There is no choice, right? If you love, you do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think parenting,
I completely
that's
agree.
a perfect example. Parents, I hate to tell you this, I have 4 kids, and you go through hell as a parent. In every way, and I think you recognize when you're going through that suffering, but it's not even a choice, because of love, and so I think if we could plug that in to sports in America, man, that's feeding the cats.
Absolutely. Love it. So let's jump in. We got a lot of good responses on Twitter of some questions that we want to jump into. Yeah. This may be a little more X's and O's, and we can really go back and forth on our answers here. The first one is going to come from Brad Dixon, as we know, is a big Feed the Cats football coach. Mm-hmm. And he gave a hard question. He looked at us and said, okay, you've got 2 to 3 days a week, 30 to 40 minutes in the weight room. What are your big rocks and why? I want to hear from you first.
Okay. We will have extremely different answers here. But I think we will probably both be right. I am not a weight room guy. I've supervised and installed weight room. I've done it, but I'm much more of a speed guy. So usually what happens is somebody else is running the weight room and I'm doing the stuff on the track. So what I say, I will quote Charlie Francis, lifting is general, sprinting is specific. So there is nothing, and if somebody wants to, argue with me on that, I say, okay, show me one thing in the weight room that fast guys are really good at and slow guys are not. And I actually asked that at the Glacier talk the other day, and somebody said, Olympic lifts. I'm like, I've seen slow guys. That's a wrong answer, man. There is nothing in the weight room that specifically makes you faster. Now, does general strength improve your ability to be durable and to be more powerful and blah, blah? Yes. All those things. So yes, stay general. The weight room is good. And then this is the other thing, is you must prioritize speed training, which means that you should always speed train before lifting. You don't ever make lifting the priority so much so that it interferes and hurts your speed training. So people say, well, what the hell does that mean? What that means is if the football coach wants to crush the legs of their athletes, they should not do that on Monday, because that's going to ruin my Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday speed workouts. He should wait till the end of the week. And I'm not even so sure that crushing a kid is a positive thing anyway. So like if you were my weight room guy, I would just tell you those things. Let's stay fairly general, and if we're going to speed train Monday through Thursday after speed training would be a perfect time to squat heavy if you feel that's a good thing to do. With that, I'd be like, what do you think you want to do? So I'll let you answer that question. I was very general, and you can be specific.
This is a great opportunity here, because we can almost look at it as say you were my head track coach and I'm your strength coach, because I am the strength guy. I am the weight room guy, and I'm learning from you guys and all these other great Les Spellman, Tony Villani, all these great, really knowledgeable coaches on how to teach speed. And the way I would do it now, and I've changed so much over the years, Coach. Like, I look back when I was a college GA 5-6 years ago, and I go, I was making my kids worse. What am I doing? Because I had this identity with strength and what it meant, and strength expression through a barbell, which can be a very misleading road to go down. So the way I would do it is this, and this is how we structure things here at Madison Academy now, is simply reverse engineer what we're doing in sport, and does it help it? If it doesn't, take it out. It's that simple. And what we do, for example, is, to me, I don't think that cleans translate to field and court sports anymore. I don't. I really don't. I did for years. I don't anymore. I took it out, mostly because of opportunity costs and time, that I don't have all the time in the world to try to get what that squeezes out for our kids. We train 2 to 3 times a week max. So I don't think we can get much from it because of how high the skill you have to have in order to get just a little bit of squeeze from it. And like you said, you ever seen a very trend line of guys that are really athletic do that well, and guys that are not, or guys that are fast? No, it's all over the place, because it's its own sport. So in our sessions, we'll go through a warm up and get ready to sprint. That's the first thing we're going to do, is we're going to go through sprint technique and prep work. So for example, what it'll look like, we'll do a stationary dynamic warm up because of space. We'll get all of our tissues moving, and then we'll get to what we call our prep work. We're going to do some technique work. So I have an assistant. So I have a lot different situation than most. I have an assistant certified strength coach. We have a staff at a high school, which is amazing. He'll take half. I'll take half. I'm doing wall drills and feeling what it means to project the hips. Let's learn how to get into our glute when we accelerate. Let's learn and feel, teach, skill, teach, and do that every day. He's doing resisted running, right? We're getting on banded work and teaching we're doing, all the A drills, marching and feeling the foot hit behind the hip, all the things you're going to do in sport in order to either separate or close space, especially in the field and court sports. So we're working on all that stuff. Okay. When we're done with the technique work, now we're going to go into more of our output stations. So we've done a little bit of technique work while we're fresh. Now we're going to do our output. That's going to be constant movement of stations. So we'll have some med ball throws or slams, something nervous system driven, something jump driven, whether it's contact time driven or landing driven, something where we're getting off the ground jumping. And then we'll have a time sprint that's record, ranked, and published where everybody can see it. What I've done with our recording is I've done this. I loved your idea of taking the 2 best times and averaging it and having that weekly average, right? And what I've done is I've recorded, all right, we've got our PR of the year, the best run we've had. We've got our rolling average of the 2 best time of our weekly averages. And then we have a 10% drop off number. So I'm looking at a kid's name, and then I've got those 3 metrics, because I'm the one that does the laser running with our dasher system. And they'll go from it's like 8 med ball slams, think 3 jumps, and then a sprint. And we do that 3 rounds. Do the math on the reps. You're thinking 8 reps of a med ball slam, 3 jumps, 8, 9, 10, 11, plus a sprint. That's 12. That's 36 total output reps for the day. We're done. And then we go lift. So that's what we're doing. So, and then when we sprint, I go, okay, and I have it on their sheets already. They find their name and they know that I'm just trying to beat my average. I'm trying to be fast. And once you put that number out, kids are going to run hard, right? Especially when you display the time. Okay. And then if they drop off below that deficit that I have on there, conversation has to happen. Why aren't you fast? What's going on? Are you hurt? Are you okay? Are you stressed?
Girlfriend.
Did you not sleep last night? Girlfriend. And guess what? If they go 2 in a row or they go one that's really bad and we have that conversation, we probably aren't going to sprint anymore. We'll shut it down.
Yep.
And we're going to go to the next thing. And then when we're done with that, that's probably about 25 minutes into the session, and we have about a 75-minute session. Then we go into our lifting. Now we can talk about the actual lifting part. I've changed philosophy on this for a while because personally, I think that we do a poor job of the weight room of taking care of our bodies and addressing health first. I'm a huge fan of tempo training because of what it does for our tendons. Because if we're going to display power, I think that kids, tendonitis is rampant in high schools. It's all I see. All my knees hurt. All my ankles hurt. And then trying to load full range of motion exercises. We do a lot of heels elevated squatting, split squatting, stuff like that. We do trap bar deadlift for strength. We do a lot of upper body chin up and push pull landmine work. We get a lot as unilateral as possible to try to get some type of rotation. Everything we do is core stability and how we position our rib cage and our pelvis. And we do a lot more slow training than we do. We like high force with strength, but we like to accumulate volume with control because of what eccentric force will do for our tendon health. So, because I'm like, I can't compete with the high velocity stuff they're trying to do in practice. So we go really high, right? We're going to sprint. We're going to do those things really, really high. Now we're in our strength training. We're going to go really, really low and think we want to build strength. We want to build resiliency and try to accumulate some volume through eccentric tempo training, but at the same time being very cognizant around sport schedules, not doing too much volume, doing just enough to get an adaptation to where, you know what's most important? Every kid in my program knows that when we go on the court or on the field, that's the most important thing. I do not prioritize the weight room. I send a message that this weight room is only helping us win. And guess what? If I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my job. And that messaging just been continuing. And that's how I do. I don't do a lot of velocity work with barbells. I don't try to do force output velocity-based training with barbells because I personally, that just makes you a better barbell lifter. But I'm still developing that philosophy. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm a huge believer in, if I have a hypothesis, I'm going to create a heuristic. I'm going to battle it and see if it'll actually last the test of time. And if it doesn't, good, I learned. And if it does, I might be onto something, right? But at the end of the day, still do not ruin performance. That's what I would do in the weight room. I know that was really long-winded, but I wanted you to get a clear idea of how we train. Yeah.
Would you agree that there is no better warm-up than sprint training?
Oh, man. Our guys can go right into the rack and whatever we have asked that day after we sprint, there ain't no warming up. We're rolling. Yep.
I think that, and I've just kind of stumbled onto this really, that there is nothing better than the most extreme thing we can do with the human body is to run as fast as we can run. That is so extreme. And, like the body can go about 10 meters a second. A bar can go about 2 meters a second. It's probably dangerous if you did that. So I just think that it's the perfect warm up. And then the other thing that I love what you mentioned, we need to start disagreeing on more things, by the way. But anyway,
I'm trying to throw something out there.
People probably already turned this shit off, like tune in for this wrestling match and hell, it's this. But anyway.
Well, hey, I've got a topic we'll get to next that I think we may have some discourse on, but let's keep going.
We built up a lot of goodwill, so I think that's fine. But I've kind of stumbled onto this idea too, that speed is a great barometer of health. Mm-hmm. And, you mentioned that, that if you're, if you're a 20-mile-an-hour guy and you're running 17, something's messed up. And we need, not you, we need to figure out what that is. It might be the coach. And that's one of the beautiful things about sprint-based football programs is that they're timing twice a week. And yes, there's a chance to get faster, and they do. But there's also a lot of reflection. Like, God, all of our guys were slower than hell on Monday. What did we do wrong? Mm-hmm. Well, coach, we blah, blah. Like it may be the coaches, it may be the kids, but you're asking the question. And I picture a group in a traditional program coming out on Monday and lining up in military formations and going through a 40-minute warm-up. You don't know who's healthy. You don't know who's diminished. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're timing, and it's such a small, like how long does it take you to get through that dynamic, the 3 times through?
Oh, golly. 12 minutes at most, 10 minutes maybe. No, 8 minutes probably. Yep. So from like very start to finish, from saying we're going to cleaned up,
I mean, in the time that it would take to run a couple laps, you are actually accomplishing something sprint-wise, but you're also accomplishing the perfect wake-up for the weight room, which, I just think that's kind of the wave of the future.
Yeah. So the next topic we can talk about is agility and change of direction.
Yep.
Because to me, all right, in football especially, and even basketball, because basketball is in such short. And I understand that. Okay, let's go ahead and agree ahead of time, so we don't have to address this. That sprinting max velocity will help rise all tide, like the tide that rise all boats. Okay, we get that. Gotcha. Stimulus wise, there's nothing you can do to repeat it. We agree to that.
Gotcha.
Skill based, because when we talk about sprint based football, and I want to hear it because like guys like Brad Dixon and maybe people that you consult with, you find a way to win in football games by separating or closing separation. I know that comes back to let's get back to acceleration. That's what I hear Lauren Landau say that all the time. You have to make some kind of decision, be very efficient with the angle you choose, and then once you get back to acceleration, you're there. You don't hardly see a football take more than 8 to 12 acceleration steps before another decision has to be made. Where does the change of direction side of things? Yeah, where does that land in Feed the Cats?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And once again, because I'm hyperbolic about the max speed thing, and why do I have to be hyperbolic? Why do I have to, go rabbit hunting with a buffalo gun? It's because too many people never max speed sprint. There are Big Ten football programs that not one time in the last year ever ramped it up to a max speed. Not once. Why? Because football is an agility and an acceleration sport. And they're 100% right that they're correct. But the problem is there's a couple. Once again, we learn by stories. Let's say I give you 2 kids, one that runs 23 miles an hour, one that runs 20. Or I give them to Tony Villani, who I've talked to quite a bit, and actually I think me and Les Bellman are going to go down there, and the 3 of us are going to put on a clinic in Fort Lauderdale in May. And
I'll be there. I'll be there.
I think it'll be interesting. And people will think, hell, Holler may get in a fight with those 2 guys. I don't think so, because the only thing I'll fight them about is if they think that max speed doesn't need to be trained. And I don't think they believe that. So if you are max speed training, agility work is really, really important. But your priorities should still be max speed. And getting back to that 23 mile an hour and 20 mile an hour guy, let's say Tony Villani's working with both of them. I guarantee the 23 mile an hour guy will be better with his agility than the 20. Because
do you think only because let me ask you this. I don't necessarily agree, because if one of the first thing is because they're not very skilled, because they don't have this database of being able to recognize things when something's happening. For example, we had the fastest kid in the entire school come play safety for us 2 years ago, and he was a liability. He's fast, but he couldn't make plays. And we say he would be good in agility, maybe good in an agility drill or a change of direction drill, but being a good football player, is that responsibility of the sport coach to teach that? That comes back to skills in the game, right? So like recognition of seeing things, patterns, and then having the change of direction skill.
And I think that's the key. We've all known football players are exceptionally fast that didn't catch a ball very well, or they're exceptionally fast, but when given a choice of left or right, they would always choose wrong. That super fast, but they didn't have that thing that we can't even define, the it factor. They didn't have the it factor, and they were a terrible player. And so what we have to guard against is to say, see, speed's not important. No, speed is important, but it's not the only thing. And I think the only way you improve speed is if you prioritize it. So the only thing that Tony said that I would question would be that once you get to a certain speed, it's time to move away from training that max speed and training agility. And I'm like, no, let's keep training the max speed, because a lot of people think that if you stop training max speed, you stay the same. And I'm here to say that.
Yeah, that's not true.
That's not true.
But it doesn't take a lot because of how nervous system driven sprinting is. Let's not, for guys that are super elite, the amount of exposures they need to hold on or get a little better is not that much.
Maybe 20 minutes twice a week. That's it. So
yeah, it's really not.
I think that's a real important thing to remember, is that when I say you must prioritize max speed, people think that you're eliminating everything else. And it's not. People think I'm Mr. Max Speed. My track team will be at max speed this week, my sprinters, for less than 20 seconds. Think about that. We will run, we never run more than 11 spiked up sprints in a week. That'd be a max. It's usually far less than that. So, and a really cool thing that Dan Paff said in a podcast I did with him recently, he said, we want a sting, not a crush. We want a sting. That brings up the whole idea about training stimulus, that we want to stimulate that max velocity stuff. We don't want to create volume.
Annihilate.
Yeah, we don't want to annihilate. That was the word he might have used other than crush. There's a lot of words we could use. So if I believe that I could work with Tony Villani and Les Spellman, and we would never disagree. Now, we may disagree on Twitter because Tony might say agility's king. I'll be like, bullshit. No, it's not king. It's king. And so he kind of backed down last week and said, okay, agility's queen. And I'm like, okay, both are royalty. But if you don't prioritize that max speed, I think what happens, and it happens in the NFL all the time, where there is just a reduced amount of speed every year with NFL players, unless they do something to change it. And I know David Montgomery did, the guy for the Bears. He worked with Chris Orfist. And David, came into the league 4.63, which means that most defensive linemen can chase him down from behind. I mean, 4.63 is not very fast. But he went to work with Corfus. When he first showed up, he was running 20.9 miles an hour. 8 weeks later, he's 22.1. Everybody saw it. I mean, he hit, I think he hit 21 miles an hour in a game once, which is like, that's pretty good with 12 pounds of pad, soft surface, third quarter. So he is literally younger right now after 3 years in the league than he was as a rookie, because remember, speed is a barometer of health. And so he's going to make millions and millions of dollars, because he was already a good football player coming out of Iowa State, but he'd never speed trained before. He ran with that running back butt, that kind of, when you're taught to run, like not showing your numbers, like all your life, you have a tendency to sprint.
Super backside, all that. Yeah.
All that stuff. And you say, well, wait, doesn't he have to run with that running back angle? Yes, he does. But he will never run fast enough. He'll never get that great training stimulus when he's running 20 miles an hour instead of 22. And so you have to teach a guy to sprint. Like this is counterintuitive too. I always say the sprinters, even if you're not a track athlete, buy a pair of track spikes and train on a track. They go, well, coach,
you can go faster
on soft surface. I don't wear track spikes. Yeah, but what if you can only run 20 miles an hour on the field, but you could get up to 22 on a track? Well, but I don't compete on a track. Yeah, but for your nervous system to get that training stimulus, that's why I also say we always run with the wind, always. But coach, isn't that like art of? No, I don't care. The nervous system is feeling a speed it's never felt before. And so all those things are good. And I'd say the same thing. I talk to basketball people all the time. Hey, basketball, 92-foot floor. You can't get up to top speed, 92 feet. But I 100% would train basketball players in the off season with max speed sprinting for the stimulus, for that sting. And people who do that, by the way, they notice vertical jumps go up, horizontal jumps go up, weight room numbers go up, because that speed is the tide that lifts all boats, even if it's not specific to the game.
If that's one thing, I know it doesn't technically count as weight room, but that would have been my answer is what do fast guys do well also in the weight room? And I would say jump, even though that doesn't really count. You know what I mean? But jump, that's one thing I see that fast guys do well.
Yep.
They jump.
And so what does that tell
usually?
You? So here's the next question. If I always say that doing I call them box jumps because it's like pretending to jump over plyo boxes and bouncing off the ground, bounce. So when I say that I can pick my 4x1 without ever seeing them sprint, by just watching that, what does that tell me about training?
You're seeing the contact times and how, because that's what happens at sprinting, but at ridiculously higher speeds.
Correct. And
right.
And the point I was trying to make is let's get better at things that fast people do well. So it tells me that we do that every day. We do box jumps every single day. Small dose, maybe jump over 5 of them one time. Pogo jumps. Fast people are good at those too. Well, let's take our offensive tackle, and don't get me started about big cats, but let's get our offensive better at pogo jumps and box jumps. And instead of jogging up stadium stairs, let's have him bounding up 3 at a time. Let's get better at things that fast people do well.
I agree. And let's segue into big cats, because there was a question off Twitter. Someone said, what do you do with, okay, let's say track and field. Do you sprint with your throwers, and what adjustments do you make? We can probably apply something similar to your big cats, offensive line, defensive line. And a big fan of Twitter that I love is a guy named Tom Blazer, who's a big offensive line guy out in California. And he loves about sprinting and seeing how, and Brandon Herring as well, who was a college offensive line coach turned strength coach at the high school level, about shin angle, and watch your offensive line guys have to sprint on a stretch play. Watch your guys have to get in a shin angle and get to the net. You want to tell me that's not important? Come on now.
But there's a reason why.
I definitely want to.
There's several things there. There's a reason why the fastest offensive tackles are picked in the first round. Number one is they're really good. And number two is that they last the longest. Slow does not age well. Slow doesn't tire well either. Slow guys, there's no amount of running for a real slow kid that makes him an effective fourth quarter player. I mean, everybody needs to improve that speed reserve. And there's just so many other things. Your first step is faster. If you're really fast in the 40, you will have a pretty good first step because that's your nervous system. Now, so And having said that, this is crazy. I asked the football coaches in my audience, I said, what percentage of high school offensive tackles are doing speed training and jump training during the winter? And somebody said less than 10%. And I said, who agrees with that? And everybody raised their hand. You know how effed up that is? That with our big kid, they say, well, those guys are just freaks in the NFL. Oh, no, there's a reason why they're really good at what they do. And one of those reasons, well, two of them is height and weight. The third one is your speed. And you have to be a good football player, too. Oh, shut up. Of course you do. But 6'5", 320-pound, good football players.
And can
gets
move?
It's the fast guys. The fast guys every time. So why are we not taking that 6'2", 230-pound kid in high school and speed training him? It makes me so upset that this is happening, and it happens everywhere. I mean, literally 90% of all big kids in high school do no speed training whatsoever. Now, the question about my throwers, this is really an important point, is that we all grow where we are planted, and we all live with the restrictions that we have to deal with. Like, it's going to get down to -8 tonight in Chicago. -8, wind chill, -.
Oh, I'm in Alabama.
I'm a little jealous. I'm a little jealous. So, and right now there's 6 inches of snow on our track. So there are certain track workouts that we cannot do because all we have is this 80-meter straightaway, and thank God we have that. But there are wrestlers wrestling on our curve. We can't. So when I say we don't run laps, partly it's because I don't agree with laps, but secondly, we can't. So having said that, do my throwers sprint train? And the answer is they should, but they don't because we don't have room for them. Now, my throws coach will do some jump drills, and like you said that you do some stationary sprint-like things in the weight room. Well, that's because you don't have 80 meters. If you had 80 meters, you might think different.
That's right.
Mike Boyle. I was an influence on Mike's speed ideas, and great story. He read one of my meanest articles I've ever written. It was really written for people like you, and just mean, like all the dumb things we do in the weight room and blah blah blah. And so instead of being mad, he flew me to Boston so I could talk to his people. And it wasn't a real easy talk because they kind of looked at me like, yeah, you can imagine. But having said that, Mike now times all the time. But I believe to do a 10-yard fly or 10-meter fly, you must have a full run in because you're wanting max speed. Of course you do. I mean, he only does like a 15-yard run into a 10. And I don't agree with that. But that's all he can do because of space. So we are constantly doing the next best thing. And so I would never criticize Mike ever for not having enough of a run in to get to a maximal speed. And he's had really good success with improved numbers. And he thinks it's really changed his entire program. So yes, our throwers should be sprinting. And our best guy does once in a while because guess what? Your best thrower is always really fast. He's 20-mile-an-hour guy, and he weighs 240. So
wow.
So fantastic thrower and really fast. So he jumps in with us once in a while, but we don't do it as much as we should.
Gotcha. We'll go one more question, and I'm going to go Joe Stokowski's question. Love Joe. And he asked a very interesting question. I'm eager to hear this too because this is specific to you. He said, what is something you have thrown out or altered significantly that you felt aligned with Feed the Cats but maybe doesn't anymore? Or what's something you have adopted that you originally didn't really align with, but maybe you've brought in or grafted into Feed the Cats? Where is it really
tweeted out
grown
today
and
a
adapted
statement
over
by
the years now.
Mark Manson that said something about, I'm always, loving his stuff about how unquestioned beliefs and, sticking to things that just because you said you believed them 10 years ago. So with Feed the Cats, what I've tried to do is to create, like my mission statement of absolute truths. And I think those absolute truths, things like speed is the tide that lifts all boats, absolute truth. Rest, recovery, and sleep is the foundation of high performance, absolute truth. I don't think those things can be negotiated. Now, so I call that like how you cook. Now, the recipe itself changes. And I often say that the next generation, this is already happening, the next generation of Feed the Cats coaches will be far better than me, because they have benefited from my journey, and now they are taking it the next step. And they will not change the absolute truths, but they'll change the recipe. And so the things, yeah.
Can you give some examples of some of those recipes? Like, that's one thing I think we want to hear is some. I know you may be getting to it, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, but we want to see like where's some recipe things you've sprinkled in and changed. Yeah, just some examples, one or two.
It's fascinating because Dave Onstad was a failed coach for the Bears like 25 years ago. And I read that he had a conditioning test where they did 20 hundreds in 20 minutes. And I thought, this is back in the 90s. And I thought, man, that's a pretty good workout. Like on a real cold, nasty day, we wouldn't even have to warm up for that because they won't be at top speed. So I'd line up everybody at the goal line and they'd run to the other side and I'd yell out the time, 14, 15. We'd try to be under 15 seconds for each one. And then when my watch hit the 1 minute mark, I'd blow the whistle again, and 113, 14. So it'd be 13, 14, 15. And really what it was a tempo workout. But for me, I used it kind of as a bad weather workout. And I don't think we've done that for like the last 6 or 7 years, more because I don't think it fits in with the Feed the Cats approach. I'm real cautious about training submaximal mechanics. Kids get enough running in their life. I don't need to build mechanics that are not speed mechanics. So I've thrown that thing out, the 20 hundreds in 20 minutes. Matter of fact, we don't do any tempo work at all. And I know smart people who do. Charlie Francis did. Brendan Thompson does. He believes in it. And to me, if anything, I've just proven that you can have a really good track team without doing tempo running. I haven't disproved tempo, but you can still be good without it. And it's more fun. One of the things that I've added in the last 2 years, it fits in really well, is what I consider sprint capacity work. Just last week, we put a chip on 13 guys, and they ran a 10 meter run into a 40 meter sprint, free lap, start going, finish going, 40 meters apart. And they would the next guy would go as soon as the other guy was 10 meters ahead of him. So in free lap, it goes, all the numbers go to your phone. We wrote down everybody's number before, so it took me 2 hours after practice, but I recorded 400 times into a spreadsheet after the practice. So what they did is this: they ran 10 40s, spiked up and fast, every single one timed, 10 40s in 10 minutes. Now, the first time I did that thinking it was like an indoor short space lactate workout. But I don't have to measure lactate to see acidosis in their eyes. They get glazy eyed. They seem nauseous. None of that happened. Was it hard? Yes. But there was no acidosis. If there was, it was just very minor. So I called it a sprint capacity workout, which means we are learning how to repeat sprint. So after a winter of doing like 3 or 4 sprints in a speed workout, here they're doing 10 in a 10-minute period. So sprint capacity is not the same as a lactate workout. And I think it's interesting. You know, my guys really ran hard. I record, rank, published everybody. We did an average mile per hour.
Gotcha.
My best kid averaged 20.6 miles per hour for 10 40s, which is really impressive. We had 4 kids over 20 mile an hour. And I think that's an interesting workout, like for a football coach that, you know, wants to speed train in the summer. And then, you know, with a couple weeks before the season, like, hey, we better start stepping up the repeat sprint ability. Now, it's important that you understand that when you do a sprint capacity workout, you are not getting faster. You're working on something else. You're working on the ability to sprint multiple times, but you are not getting faster. So the reason why we don't do sprint capacity year round is because we don't want to miss a day of getting faster. So that would be one thing. I've changed the way we do relay handoffs, but that doesn't have anything to do with Feed the Cats. Overall, you know,
Gotcha. Yeah.
My practices look a little different than they did before, but they still fit into all those mission statements. You know, of less is more, and we don't want to be here for 2 hours and things like that.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, this conversation was phenomenal. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about it. We actually agreed a lot more than I thought we wouldn't. Which, when we have these type of conversations, when we get outside of certain mediums and get into other, that's when we can be powerful together, is when we can talk, find common ground, and now let's communicate on a higher level. Let's get in front of each other's faces, whether it's digital or in real life, and we can help collaborate more and be a lot stronger than just what we type on Twitter. Now that's another thing, is like with your
Buffalo gun,
uncle, because you say you rabbit hunt with a deer rifle or a deer gun, whatever your analogy was. Sometimes it takes that type of abrasiveness. Yeah. It takes that kind of abrasiveness to get somebody's attention, you know, and that's kind of my thing too, is that sometimes being hyperbolic of understanding that I need to grab your attention before I can even communicate to you. If I'm always just Mr. Nice Guy, my tweets are just going to flow through the wind. Who am I helping? Because some people don't know they need help, and I know they need my help. So I'm going to find a way to get in front of their face. And some people call that unethical, and I say that they're full of shit.
You know, Mike Boyle gave, you know, he's a wise dude now. He said something on Twitter the other day that instead of like just blasting somebody in a response to a tweet, to ask a question, you know, and I think that's a brilliant idea, that you, by asking a question, you can start the same conversation that you're wanting to have without causing that guy to block you right away. And I think Twitter is kind of like when you're driving in a car and somebody cuts you off, and you know, like, screw you, you son of a bitch. You know, like if you were walking down the street, right, you wouldn't talk to that guy like that. You know what I'm saying? But when you get face to face with somebody, like, it would be very difficult for me or you to be mean when we're face to face.
You know, absolutely. I love the question. I've adopted that as well, and I've noticed that with Mike. Uh-oh. Did I lose you, Tony? I think I lost you. I don't know what happened. Did we lost connection here. That's all right. We'll get back on here in a minute. We'll keep rolling. I have no idea what's happened. Retro. I think I lost him somehow. Hopefully we can get back on here. I'll have to edit it in post, but that's fine. Where'd you go, Coach? I can always end it. It's no big deal. If so, I'll just press end and we'll edit it from there. I'll give it about 3 more minutes. I gotta go. Okay.